Her son dismissed her, called her past her prime. Margaret Moore, widow and retired librarian, didn't protest. At the dinner table he belittled her, his words sharp like broken glass, but Margaret simply watched him, her fingers tightening around the edge of her glass. By morning, her name would be written in the deeds of properties he thought he'd inherited. She had spent a lifetime serving her family, now she would serve herself. And when he came knocking for the inheritance he thought was his, the papers would stand silent and unyielding, their answers as sharp as the look in her eyes. I'm curious, where in the world are you joining us from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed for all the latest updates. They stared, whispered. I felt invisible in plain sight. The cafe table was the same one Evelyn chose every Thursday. Corner seat, half shade. A view of the bakery window and the town square clock, which hadn't kept time properly since the bicentennial parade. She laid her book on the table, spine up, and pulled her scarf tighter around her throat. The breeze carried the scent of cinnamon and something faintly metallic. She had just taken her first sip of coffee when the shrill, uneven laughter began. It came from the table beside hers, an affluent family she didn't recognize. Parents in coordinated pastels, a teenage daughter with a voice that sliced like glass, and a boy no older than 8 flinging sugar packets into his water glass, like it was a science experiment. The laughter wasn't cruel at first, just loud, unfiltered, but then came the sideways glances. She's been here for hours, the girl stage whispered, not trying hard enough to hide it. Is she just alone? More laughter, a snort from the mother. The father leaned in with mock concern. Maybe she's waiting for someone to remember her. Evelyn didn't move. She kept her hands wrapped around the coffee cup, heat sinking into her palms. The girl giggled again, and the boy repeated it louder this time. Maybe she's just old and bored. Evelyn's heart thudded, not fast but heavy, like someone knocking at a locked door. She turned the page in her book, even though she hadn't read the last sentence. Her fingers were stiff. Her throat was dry. There was nothing inherently new about the moment. She'd been made to feel invisible before. At church, at the pharmacy, at dinners where younger women talked over her like she was decor. But this was different. This was a full performance of dismissal. Just then, Lily approached, mid-30s, quiet, thoughtful, often lost in her own world of camera lenses and poetry readings. She didn't say anything, just placed a hand gently on Evelyn's shoulder before sliding into the opposite chair with her tea. Her gaze shifted briefly to the family, then back to Evelyn. That was all. No apology for sitting, no commentary, just presence. It steadied her. Evelyn stared into her cup and let the noise at the next table fade into the clatter of flatware and the chatter of sparrows. She reached into her purse for a tissue and pulled out an old envelope instead, the real estate flyer she hadn't meant to keep. It was still there, the address, the listing photo. Across the street, the for sale sign still swayed gently in the breeze, staked into a patch of crabgrass in front of what used to be a tailor's shop. Brick facade, broad windows, tired trim. No one gave it a second glance anymore. Just like her. She looked down at the flyer again. Lily followed her gaze. What's that? She asked softly, breaking the silence between them. Evelyn slid the paper across the table. Lily glanced at it, and then looked back at her with wide eyes. Her mouth opened, then closed. Evelyn, she whispered, this name on the listing, this is your name? Evelyn said nothing. Her smile was quiet, but it was there. Lily stared at her, something flickering between disbelief and wonder. You're buying it? She asked. Evelyn didn't answer. Instead, she turned to the window across the street, watching her reflection in the glass of the vacant building. No longer waiting to be seen, ready to make them look. She owned their table without them knowing. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, the flyer now tucked under her palm. She didn't answer Lily right away. Instead, she let her gaze rest on the abandoned storefront across the street, sunlight catching in its clouded windows, a faded closed sign swinging on a rusty chain. I bought it 12 years ago, she said finally, her voice low but clear, before Robert passed. Before the kids stopped calling every Sunday, Lily's eyebrows rose, her tea forgotten. You own that? Evelyn nodded once. It was the first and only thing I bought just for myself. No suggestions, no shared bank accounts, no one else's name on the line. But why keep it secret? Lily's tone wasn't judgment, just curiosity edged with awe. Evelyn smiled faintly, tracing the edge of the table with her thumb. At first I didn't mean to, I just liked knowing I had something of my own, but after a while, it became a kind of shield, my little rebellion. They sat in silence for a moment, the cafe's clatter softening behind them. Pull it up, Evelyn said suddenly. Lily blinked. What? The county property site. Let's see if the deed's still in my name. Lily set her phone on the table, fingers flying across the screen. A few taps later, she leaned in, reading aloud, owner of record, Evelyn May Broderick. She turned the screen for Evelyn to see. Evelyn leaned in, blinking at her own name, her initials stamped beside the parcel ID. There it was. Not just memory, not just metaphor. Proof. She let out a quiet breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for years. That family, she murmured, mocking me like I'm decoration, sitting on ground I already paid for. Lily grinned, equal parts mischief and admiration. You literally own the space under their smug little brunch. Evelyn's smile was slow, unexpected. It stretched into her cheeks and pressed warmth behind her eyes. I don't want to humiliate them, she said after a beat. But I wouldn't mind, shifting the balance. Lily tilted her head. So what's the plan? You show up with a bulldozer next Thursday? Evelyn chuckled. Tempting. But no, that would only give them an excuse to feel superior. Poor woman's finally lost it. So what then? Evelyn folded the flyer and slid it back into her purse. Something elegant, legal, undeniable. She paused, her gaze flicking back across the street. The cafe sat comfortably on the edge of the lot. She remembered the original lease terms from the back of the file folder. She'd kept the document filed between old love letters and tax returns. They rent from me, she murmured, mostly to herself. They just don't know it. Lily's eyes widened. Evelyn, you're the landlord. Evelyn nodded. And their lease comes up in 6 months. A beat of silence. Then Lily leaned forward. You could raise their rent, force them out, or better yet, buy the business yourself. Put in something better. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Like what? I don't know, Lily said with a grin. Something that makes people feel seen. Evelyn sat back, a spark lighting in her chest. The same flicker she'd felt when she signed those papers years ago, unsure but brave. Not spiteful, strategic. The breeze picked up and she reached for her scarf again, tighter this time, but not to hide, to ground herself. That night, long after the dishes were done, and the sky had turned its deepest shade of blue, Evelyn sat in her study with the overhead lamp glowing like a secret. The flyer lay beside her. Next to it, the county's lease terms, long outdated. She opened her laptop, hands steady, shoulders square. She drafted the email with slow precision. Subject: property at 14 Main Street. Lease review and intent to redevelop. Dear Mr. Howard, I'm the owner of the parcel currently leased to the cafe at 14 Main Street. Her finger hovered over send, for a breathless moment. Then she clicked. The email vanished into the ether. But Evelyn didn't. She stayed bold, grounded and suddenly electrified. Tomorrow they'd sit there again. But this time, every bite of their brunch would rest on a floor she was ready to reclaim. Revenge sounded sweet, but costs me my calm. The law office smelled like printer toner and lemon polish. A file folder sat on the polished oak table between Evelyn and the attorney, its metal prongs glinting in the overhead light. She folded her hands in her lap, resisting the urge to smooth the creases in her scarf. Everything in this office was taut, like the pause before a verdict. Technically, said Mr. Howard, adjusting his glasses, you already own the land. What you're asking is to reclaim the lease and shift the usage right. That's a process. Rezoning, site redevelopment application, compliance with ADA regulations if you want to repurpose. Evelyn nodded slowly. And how long will that take? If everything moves smoothly, 6 to 8 months, but you'll need to notify the tenants in writing. 60-day notice, minimum. They have rights too. He offered a tight smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. And the cost? She asked, her voice even. Howard flipped a few pages. Between legal filings, architect plans and permits, you're looking at somewhere between 30 and 40,000 up front. Evelyn didn't flinch, but inside her stomach curled like parchment catching fire. That night, back at her kitchen table, she stared at the figures Lily had sketched on a notepad. We can do it, Lily said. If we're careful, if we cut unnecessary spending. Unnecessary? Evelyn asked with a tired laugh. You're assuming I spend anything necessary. Then it's time you did, Lily replied. For once, put your money where your worth is. Evelyn's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the draft contract. The paper felt heavier than it should have. She hadn't signed anything this significant since Robert's will. The pen hovered. Just then her phone buzzed. A text from her son, Daniel. What is this rumor about you buying up old shops? Please tell me you're not throwing money away at your age. Call me. No warmth. No curiosity. Just reprimand dressed as concern. Evelyn stared at the screen, then at the contract, then at her reflection in the window beyond. She didn't reply. Instead, she took a breath, centered her pen, and signed. Her signature was neat, confident, familiar. She scanned the pages and sent them from her laptop with a soft click, then pushed the paper copy away. Lily reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You did it. But Evelyn didn't smile yet. Not fully. 2 days passed. Then 3. On the 4th day, Howard called. There's a complication, he said, his tone already braced. What kind? She asked, voice like still water. The cafe owner, he filed an emergency clause with the town office this morning. Claims there's a community hardship risk in losing the business. Wants a grace extension. Says the property's tied up in a long-term lease he's been quietly renegotiating. The clerk flagged it. Evelyn blinked. He can do that, legally. Not easily, but it gums things up. He's buying time, and he's been in this game longer than most. He knows how to stall. Outside, a crow landed on the fence. It stared in, silent and still as if waiting. He's trying to block me, Evelyn said. He's trying to wear you down, Howard replied. Evelyn sat down at the table. Her tea had gone cold. Her fingers curled slightly around the rim of the cup. Not for warmth, but for clarity. He wanted her to back down. He wanted her to feel old, overwhelmed, out of her depth. She'd played that part for years. But not anymore. She reached for her phone, not to call Daniel, but to text someone else. Lily, she typed, we've got a fight. Let's make it worth the trouble. And as she hit send, a small defiant smile crept across her face. It wasn't over. It was only beginning. The landlord's glare said, I had no right here. The breeze off Main Street was thin and sharp, tugging at Evelyn's scarf as she crossed the road, folder tucked under her arm. The cafe patio was already half full. Small town brunchers clinking mimosa glasses. Toddlers squirming in booster seats. The sun painted everything in soft gold, but it did little to ease the chill. Mark stood near the edge of the sidewalk, arms folded, sunglasses perched high on his forehead like a man about to lecture a child. He was younger than her by 2 decades, but his posture was defensive, his jaw too tight to hide the pen. You've got some nerve, he said the moment she stepped onto the property line. Evelyn stopped just short of him, chin level. So do you, she replied calmly. You come sniffing around with your little contracts. He sneered. Stirring up trouble like this is your legacy. Picking fights with real businesses because you're bored in retirement. A few patrons turned their heads. Someone paused mid-sip. Evelyn ignored them. I'm here because this is my land, she said. Bought and paid for in full, before your espresso machine was even installed. Mark laughed. A high, tight sound that didn't touch his eyes. You think you're going to bully me into shutting down? You're not the first old-timer to come waving paperwork and entitlement. I've been in this game a long time. She didn't From a bench nearby, Lily sat casually with her tea, phone angled discreetly on her lap, its red light blinking. Evelyn removed the deed from her folder, unfolded it, and held it between them. The paper flapped slightly in the breeze, but remained firm in her grasp. You've been profiting off my land for years, she said. That ends now. If you'd like to discuss the transition with Grace, I'm willing. If not, the lease agreement, and the courts will decide. Mark took a step forward, voice lowered, but shaking. You want to tear down a local fixture. That's your story now. You'll be the villain of every headline, I promise you. Better than being the footnote in my own life, she replied. The words landed hard. A nearby table stopped eating altogether. Mark's smirk faltered. You're going to regret this, he muttered. You have no idea what you've started. Evelyn smiled, cool and even. Oh, I do. I started it the day I stopped waiting for permission. Mark opened his mouth to speak again, but a black car pulled up to the curb. A man in a navy suit stepped out, briefcase in hand. Miss Broderick? He asked, voice clipped. Evelyn turned, already knowing. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Mark Riley, the lawyer said, unfolding a thick stack of documents. You are being served notice of intent to contest your claim of lease termination, under the Community Preservation Ordinance. Mark smiled again wide. This time, Lily stood from her bench, camera now in plain sight. Evelyn reached for the envelope, but not before taking one last quiet look around. Diners, witnesses, her town. She accepted the papers with steady hands. Evelyn tucked the envelope into her bag without breaking eye contact. Then she turned to Lily. Tell Howard, she said. We'll see them in court. And behind her the cafe buzzed. Not with laughter this time, but with whispers. The kind that meant the town was paying attention. A stranger handed me coffee and the morning after the confrontation, Evelyn found herself back at the cafe, not for the irony, but for the ritual. She needed the heat of the cup, the sharp scent of coffee grounds, the familiarity of a seat she once claimed before anyone noticed she was there. She didn't sit this time. Not yet. A young waitress emerged from the side entrance, her apron tied too tight and her hair coming loose in wisps. She spotted Evelyn near the curb, hesitated, then approached. I saw what happened yesterday, she said, eyes cautious but kind. Mark was well, he was who he always is. She held out a to-go cup, steam curling from the lid. This one's on me, thank you for standing up. Evelyn blinked, unsure for a moment whether the words were meant for someone else. She took the cup slowly. Thank you, she murmured. The waitress gave a shy smile and disappeared back inside before Evelyn could ask her name. Lily was already at the bench across the street, scrolling through her phone, sunlight bouncing off her screen. 53 shares, she said without looking up. 17 comments, and 24 private messages asking who you are and how to help. You posted it. Lily nodded, muted the faces, but left the audio. Your voice was velvet and steel. People noticed. Evelyn exhaled slowly and sipped the coffee. It was strong, bitter, perfect. By afternoon, a handwritten letter arrived at her mailbox. No return address. The envelope held a typed note and a business card. Ms. Broderick, I saw the video. I believe you're fighting for something bigger than just a property line. I specialize in tenant disputes and land use law. If you need an ally, I'd be honored to assist. A friend in practice. Beneath the message was a direct email, and a firm name Evelyn didn't recognize, but the credentials checked out. She showed it to Lily, who raised her eyebrows and whispered, Anonymous Pro Bono Legal Counsel. That's a cinematic plot point, Evelyn. They laughed. Just once. But it broke something open in Evelyn's chest. Something knotted and tight that had been there since Mark's smirk, since the envelope, since the first whisper in the cafe that made her feel like wallpaper. That night, Evelyn noticed something else. Her son's latest post on social media about protecting community business owners had vanished. So had his comment dismissing her as emotional. No apology followed. No message. But it was gone. And in its absence, Evelyn felt something strange. Not closure, but possibility. She printed the letter and slid it into her folder of documents, between the lease and the zoning codes. The pages were filling, and so was her conviction. This isn't revenge, she said aloud, standing by the window as dusk painted the sky in lavender and charcoal. This is reclamation. Lily nodded, feet propped on the ottoman beside her. It's about time someone rewrote what power looks like around here. They spent the evening in front of Evelyn's fireplace, sorting files, drafting responses, and scribbling timelines in pencil on notepads that smelled of paper and lavender oil. At one point, Lily read a phrase aloud from an old town zoning statute. It actually says, The landowner shall have final discretion over any modification of primary commercial use, provided due notice and municipal compliance. You do have authority here, Evelyn. She smiled. Not a sharp one this time. A full one. Something born not of vengeance, but vision. The fire crackled low. Outside, wind whispered through the leaves, and somewhere in the distance, the courthouse bells chimed 9. Her phone buzzed. A message from Howard. Hearing confirmed. Next Thursday, 10 a.m. where read. Bring strength. Evelyn tapped her reply. One word. Ready. And as she set the phone down, the flames danced higher in the hearth. For the first time in decades, she wasn't preparing to defend herself. She was preparing to lead. The gavel echoed. My fight really began. The municipal courthouse was smaller than Evelyn remembered. Beige bricks, flickering fluorescent lights, and that scent of institutional coffee lingering like a dare. She arrived 20 minutes early, her red coat sharp against the washed-out hallway, the folder under her arm perfectly aligned with her stride. Inside the courtroom, the benches creaked under the weight of community curiosity, shopkeepers, retirees, a reporter from the local paper scribbling in a steno pad, like it was still night. Mark sat at the defendant's table in a charcoal suit that looked expensive, but wore him instead of the other way around. His lawyer, blonde, severe and armed with an oversized briefcase, whispered in his ear without breaking her poker face. Evelyn didn't acknowledge. She walked to the front and took her seat beside the pro bono attorney, who had signed the letter, a friend in practice. His name was Julian Hart, and though he looked barely old enough to rent a car, he carried himself with the calm of someone who believed more in law than in ego. Judge Callahan entered at exactly 10:01, robes sweeping like a curtain call. This court will now hear Broderick versus Riley, he said, voice gravelly but measured. Property dispute regarding commercial lease and land use rights at 14 Main Street. Julian rose, speaking for, Your Honor, my client is the verified deed holder for the parcel in question, with supporting documentation and zoning precedents, under Municipal Code 8. She seeks the lawful right to reclaim the lease for redevelopment purposes, fully within her ownership discretion. He passed the folder forward. The judge flipped through it slowly, his brow furrowed. Mark's lawyer stood. Objection on procedural grounds. The leasehold includes a renewal clause that was submitted for recording pending town clerk validation. Evelyn could see the strain behind Mark's calm facade. A bead of sweat trailed down his temple. That renewal was never filed before the contested date. Julian countered. And the clause in question refers only to month-to-month extensions, not to a full 5-year continuation. The judge raised a brow. And where's the clerk's confirmation of this alleged extension? The opposing attorney cleared her throat, then shuffled papers. It's pending review. The judge's voice hardened. Then it isn't valid. There was a beat of silence. Mark muttered something under his breath too low to catch, but Evelyn didn't need to. She could feel it. The ground beneath him shifted. Then, as if drawn by instinct or guilt, she turned her head and spotted Daniel sitting quietly in the back row. He wasn't in a suit, just jeans and a jacket, his arms folded, eyes uncertain. She hadn't expected him to come. Her breath caught. The judge looked up. Miss Broderick, do you wish to make a statement before ruling? She stood. Not with fury, not with bravado, just clarity. I don't want revenge, she said, her voice clear but soft. I want my property respected. I want to build something that gives back, not take space for granted. I've lived long enough to know silence is comfortable, but change is louder, and I'm ready for the noise. A ripple moved through the courtroom. The judge stared at her a long moment, then nodded once. I find for Miss Broderick on the primary claim, he said, striking the gavel with a sharp thud. Pending full wire transfer of remaining redevelopment funds within 48 hours, rights to modify or terminate the lease may proceed. Mark's jaw dropped open. His lawyer leaned in furiously. Evelyn sat down, fingers cool against her knees. Julian whispered, We did it. But Evelyn didn't exhale. Not yet. She knew this wasn't the end. It was the moment between breaths, between promise and proof. Outside, the sun had shifted. Evelyn stood on the courthouse steps, the judgment echoing in her ears. She checked her watch. 48 hours. She turned to Julian. Let's move. because winning the ruling meant nothing. If she couldn't pay for the future she was claiming, the bank called, my account was frozen. Evelyn stood at the window, phone pressed to her ear, her breath shallow and steady only by force. Outside, morning birds chirped as if nothing had shifted. But everything had. Yes, she said slowly, enunciating each syllable. I'm trying to initiate a wire transfer. On the other end, the banker's voice was apologetic but firm. We're seeing a temporary hold on the transaction due to a flagged activity notice. Unusual movement, paired with the amount it triggered a precautionary freeze. Freeze, she repeated. But I authorized. I understand, Mrs. Broderick, but federal compliance requires manual review. It could take 48 hours. Her hands trembled around the phone. 48 hours was all she had. Not a moment more. She hung up without thanking him. Lily burst through the kitchen door, less than 10 minutes later, hair wet from rain, cheeks flushed. I've spoken to Marcia and Edwin, she said without preamble. They can lend small amounts, not much, but something. We can piece this together if we— No. Evelyn raised a hand. Her voice was low, tired. I won't pull people into this just to scrape at the bottom of their savings. Not unless there's no other option. She walked to the dining room table, staring at the pile of documents they had so carefully organized. The plan was solid. The ruling was there, but without money, it was a sandcastle against tide. I can feel it slipping. Evelyn whispered. The computer chimed. An email. Subject private offer. Discretion required. She opened it. The message was short, direct. Miss Broderick, I understand your funding is time sensitive. I can wire the full amount today. No repayment required. I ask only to remain anonymous. No publicity. No terms. Just trust. You're doing something important. Let me help. Below the text a wire confirmation form and a phone number with no name. Lily read over her shoulder. That's either a lifeline or a trap. Evelyn scrolled to the bottom. The routing number was clean. The domain was encrypted. It's real, she said quietly. But what's the cost? Before Evelyn could answer, the phone rang. Daniel. She stared at his name for a long moment before picking up. Mom. No preamble. No pleasantries. I heard about the court win. I still don't get why you're doing this, but if the money's the issue, I can co-sign something. Short-term credit line. You don't even have to use it unless you— I appreciate that, Evelyn said. And she did. She truly did. But as he rambled about repayment schedules and bridging loans, all she could see was the future she'd spent so long reclaiming, quietly tethered again. Not out of malice, but out of doubt disguised as care. She hung up gently, then sat beside Lily, the anonymous offer still open on the screen. This feels insane, she said. Lily nodded. But so did filing that lease motion. So did standing in court in red. You said it yourself. Change is louder. Evelyn inhaled. The scent of rain clung to the open window, crisp and electric. She reached for her pen, signed the authorization, and hit send. The screen flickered. Then confirmed. Transfer initiated. Nothing dramatic happened. No confetti. No thunderclap. Just silence. And then the next morning, an envelope slid through her mail slot. A thick one. Inside Mark's final notice. Eviction. Not hers. His. Evelyn stared at the bold print. Notice to vacate. Mark had issued a counterclaim. A challenge to her new status as property developer. And across the bottom, in sharp legal font, pending court review of disputed transfer. She folded the paper slowly, breath shallow. She had 48 hours to prove she wasn't just an owner, but the future they all feared. I held the papers. It felt too easy. The eviction notice sat heavy in her lap, its pages thick with legal language that felt colder than she remembered. Evelyn hadn't expected it to feel like this strange vacuum where triumph should be. The clerk had stamped her filing that morning, crisp and clean, as if it were just another form in a system designed to forget the humans inside it. But Evelyn remembered. She remembered every smirk Mark had given her, every quiet dismissal, every time she'd been treated like she didn't belong in the world she once helped build. Still, as she slipped the notice into the envelope and handed it to the courier, she found no joy, only relief, and a twinge of something darker. The fallout came quickly. That afternoon, a woman knocked on Evelyn's door, mid-30s, flushed face, a child clinging to her coat. "Are you Mrs. Broderick?" she asked. Evelyn nodded slowly. "I'm Mark's daughter-in-law. We live above the cafe. That's my kid's school across the street." Evelyn's hand gripped the doorframe. "I get that it's business," the woman continued, her voice cracking, "but we didn't know. No warning, no time to move, and now they're saying 60 days and we're gone. I'm following the law," Evelyn said quietly. "The same law that let Mark build his name on land he didn't own. But this affects more than him." The woman snapped, eyes narrowing. "You've made your point, but now you're just kicking families out onto the curb." Evelyn didn't answer. The woman turned, clutching the boy's hand, and walked away. The child glanced back once, curious not angry. Inside, Evelyn stood motionless for a long time. Later, Lily sat across from her with a laptop open and tension knotting her shoulders. "The paper wants a comment. So does the community blog. Everyone suddenly wants your story." "My story," Evelyn echoed. "Yes. The one where the quiet widow takes down a business, or the one where she reclaims her legacy. Depends on who's writing it." "I didn't do this for a headline," Evelyn said. "I know, but that doesn't mean they won't make one." The press emails came in waves, subject lines like "Silver Fox Strikes Back" and "Downtown Shakeup, Broderick versus Riley." She closed the laptop and pressed her palms against her knees. It wasn't revenge, but it felt like fallout. That evening, Evelyn slipped outside without telling Lily. She crossed the street alone and stood at the edge of the cafe patio, now deserted. The chairs were stacked, the umbrella poles unlatched, the window blinds drawn. She walked slowly to the table, the same one where the family had once laughed at her like she was part of the furniture. It was empty now, but it wasn't hers. Not really. Not yet. Not in the way she thought it would be. She sat anyway. The seat creaked beneath her weight. A breeze tugged at the edge of her coat. She looked around and for a fleeting moment, it felt like the whole town was holding its breath. "I wanted justice," she whispered. "Not ghosts." Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Mrs. Broderick?" A man's voice, crisp and professional. "This is Matthew Ellison, from WMCT Evening News. We're covering your legal victory downtown. We'd like to interview you tomorrow, on site, at the cafe property. Our viewers want to hear your side." She didn't "We'd like to understand what this win really means." Evelyn looked across the patio at the shadow of what was, and the echo of what could be. Then she lifted the phone to her ear and said, "I'll be there." Because if the world was finally listening, she would decide what they heard. They wanted headlines. I wanted respect. The air the next morning smelled of coffee and electricity. Camera vans lined the curb. Matthew Ellison, from WMCT, stood beneath a tripod-mounted mic boom, his shirt too crisp for the soft edge of a town still waking up. Evelyn stood by the patio gate in her rust-red coat, watching him shake hands with the sound tech, as if they were co-hosting a parade. "Whenever you're ready, Mrs. Broderick," he said with a smile too wide to be genuine. She nodded and stepped forward. Not for him, not for the camera, but for the quiet woman she used to be, the one who'd been laughed at over Eggs Benedict and half-priced Bellinis. The lens blinked red. The interview began. By lunch, the video was up. By dinner, it had nearly 5,000 views. She didn't read the comments, but Lily did. "You've got a fan club," she said, dropping her phone onto the counter where Evelyn was organizing city paperwork. "Half the town's applauding your grit. The other half wants to know if you're opening a bakery." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, and that's when Lily pulled out her notebook. "I've been thinking," she said, flipping to a page filled with bullet points and sketches. "What if you didn't just own the space but used it? A cafe, a gathering spot, something warm. You said yourself you wanted more than silence." Evelyn looked at the notepad. It was messy but passionate. Familiar handwriting from nights spent at her kitchen table. A tiny, imperfect dream scribbled in ink and hope. Before she could respond, her phone lit up again. Ed Jade Eats Local had tagged her in a video. A smiling influencer in oversized sunglasses stood in front of the vacant cafe lot, speaking into her phone like it was the gospel. "Downtown needs revival," she said, "and Mrs. Broderick is the revolution. I say pop-up cafe run by local hands. Who's with me?" Thousands of comments poured in. "She's becoming a mascot," Evelyn muttered, pressing her palm to her forehead. Lily shrugged. "Mascots are symbols. Symbols move things. Symbols get torn down just as quickly," Evelyn replied. That evening Daniel called. She answered this time. "You're becoming a character, Mom," he said. "I saw the interview. The influencer clips. People don't know the full story, and you're turning your life into some public theater. I didn't ask for any of this," she said softly. "But you didn't stop it either." They hung up after 5 minutes. Cordial. Clipped. A son still unsure where his mother had gone. Afterward, she called Julian, her attorney. "Am I liable if I turn this into a business?" she asked. "Depends. If it's just you and a dream, there's if it's structured, non-profit, partnership, lease agreements, you're safer. But everything has cost, Evelyn, not just legal, emotional, time, energy. And what if I do nothing?" "You'll be safe," he said. "But you'll still have that key in your pocket." She ended the call, then wandered the perimeter of the lot. The sky was violet. The bricks of the building glowed faintly in the soft wash of street lamp light. She imagined soft music playing, a chalkboard menu, a corner table where anyone might sit and not be ignored. A space for visibility, not silence. She didn't need to open a cafe, that wasn't the point. But maybe she wanted to open a door. Later that night, just as she was brushing her teeth, her phone buzzed again. An email. Subject: "Let's open a community eatery together." Evelyn stared at the screen. The sender was local. A name she hadn't heard in years. Her hand hovered over the mouse. A knock echoed from her front door. Not urgent, but intentional. She glanced toward the hallway, the email glowing behind her. Someone else had decided tonight was the moment to be seen. Mark offered terms. "I saw seeds of partnership." Evelyn didn't open the door right away. The knock was too measured, too familiar. The kind that came not from a stranger but from someone with unfinished business. When she finally pulled it open, Mark Riley stood beneath the porch light, his hands in his jacket pockets, his tie askew like it had been pulled loose in frustration hours ago. "I'm not here to fight," he said quickly. "May I come?" She considered him for a long beat, then stepped aside. He didn't wander, just stood in the entryway like a man who understood his welcome came with terms. Evelyn folded her arms. "What is it?" "I saw the interviews, the social buzz, the influencer thing," he muttered, glancing down. "You've got people rallying. I won't lie. I hated it, but I also realized something." He looked up. "You have the momentum, and I have, well, regrets, a lot of them." Evelyn didn't respond. Her silence filled the room like smoke. "I came to offer this," he continued. "A proposal. You want to turn the property into a cafe, community center, whatever. It could work. But starting from scratch, it's brutal. Permits, staff, build out." He stepped forward. Tentative. "Let me help fund it. Co-fund. I've got restaurant equipment contacts, suppliers, trained staff. We split management 50-50. And I step back after year 1. You think I trust you after what you pulled?" Her voice wasn't sharp. It was clean like a blade freshly honed. Mark winced. "I deserved that." Lily stood at the edge of the hallway, having overheard most of it. "But it's not the worst idea," she said cautiously. "A co-investment could make the project viable sooner." Evelyn turned to her. "You trust him." "I trust you," Lily replied. "And I trust you to write terms tight enough that not even Mark could wiggle through them." Mark raised both palms. "No tricks. You draft the contract. I sign. I don't want to fight you anymore. Evelyn, I want to build something that matters." A beat passed. The sound of a clock ticking in the kitchen. Then Evelyn's phone buzzed. Daniel. She ignored it. But the moment lingered. She opened the call log later. His voicemail. Already waiting. "Mom, I heard about the proposal. Please, this guy tried to destroy you. You don't make a meal with someone who once poisoned your water." She closed the voicemail without responding. That night, She sat at the dining table with Lily and Julian, a fresh pot of tea between them. The contract grew slowly. Clauses on governance, transparency, exit clauses, and non-interference. Make him a silent partner, Julian advised. No voting rights, equity not control. They worked until midnight. And the next morning, Mark returned. No suit, no entourage, just him. She laid the contract down. You agree to every word, she said. You speak only when asked. You show up, you fund. You listen, but you don't steer this ship. I've earned the wheel. Mark scanned the document slowly, jaw tight, eyes narrowed, until finally he nodded. I'll sign, he said, lifting the pen, and he did. A full signature, no hesitation. They shook hands, not warmly, not coldly, just firmly. As he turned to leave, the front gate clicked. A figure stepped in, slim, composed, heels crunching lightly on the gravel. Mark's wife. She stepped onto the porch, her eyes sweeping Evelyn with polite contempt. Interesting, she said with a smile colder than ice. So this is where we are now. Evelyn straightened, sensing the next battle before it was named. Mark's wife didn't wait for an invitation. She walked past him, past Evelyn, into the hallway like it still belonged to her. And Evelyn, heart steady. Partnerships are easy. Power is never quiet. They call it redemption. I call it home. Dust danced in the sunbeams, slicing through the open windows of the cafe, now stripped to its bones. The old counters had been hauled out, leaving behind scuff marks and a smell of citrus cleaner and sawdust. Evelyn stood just beyond the threshold, sleeves rolled up, clipboard in hand, boots planted firm in the dirt-flecked tile. Where do you want the shelving units? A voice called from the back. Left wall, she said without looking. And tell Richard to anchor them this time. We're not losing them to the first spring storm. The volunteers moved like clockwork. Not all of them knew her. Not personally, but they knew of her. That was enough. A man from the hardware store brought in donated paint cans. A retired teacher offered to sew cafe aprons. A group of teenagers cleared out the back alley, their laughter echoing through the brick corridors like a hymn. Evelyn didn't expect to hear. She found herself smiling more than she meant to. The cafe space had never felt like hers before, not even after the ruling. But now, as voices layered over hammering and the whir of a power drill, it began to hum like a heartbeat. Mrs. Broderick. She turned. It was her, Mark's daughter-in-law. No coat this time, just a sweater, hair pinned up, palms open, no child beside her. I wanted to apologize, the woman said, for what I said the day I came to your door. I didn't understand then. I still don't, maybe, but I see it now. The care, the weight of it all. I wanted you to know. I regret how I handled it. Evelyn studied her carefully. There was no performance in her voice, no entitlement, but there was also something else, a shadow of proximity to Mark, to what had once been complicity, even if passive. I appreciate your words, Evelyn said evenly. But I'm not here to heal history. I'm here to build what comes next. The woman nodded, eyes downcast. If you need volunteers, I can. There's a list at the side door. Evelyn interrupted gently. Same rules as everyone else. She nodded again and turned back toward the sidewalk. Evelyn didn't watch her go. Outside, Lily knelt in the dirt of what used to be the edge of a neglected lot. Her hands were covered in soil, sleeves streaked with brown, eyes gleaming with effort. She was planting what she called the belonging garden, a cluster of perennials, herbs and native flowers, donated by women from her poetry group. They grow wild and stubborn, Lily had said, patting down a root, just like us. Evelyn brought out a tin cup filled with hot coffee and handed it to Lily. First toast, she said. They tapped their mugs together. To stubborn roots, Lily whispered. Later that week, Evelyn opened the local paper. She hadn't planned to, but the front page bore a photo of her in her red coat, hands dusty, clipboard in hand. The headline read, From Mockery to Movement, Broderick leads cafe revival. She folded the page carefully and tucked it behind the counter in progress, between the ledgers and blueprints. When she emerged back outside, someone was waiting near the garden. A teenage girl, One Evelyn didn't recognize. She held out an envelope. "It's from the town hall," she said. "They said it's an invitation." Evelyn took it slowly. Inside, printed in elegant typeface, Town Hall Honors Series. "We invite Evelyn Broderick to speak on the power of personal legacy and community renewal. Next Thursday, 7 p.m." Her hand trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer audacity of history folding inward like this. Evelyn stared down at the letter, wind tugging gently at her coat. Then she looked across the street at the table where it all began. Not a seat of shame anymore. A place where voices once rose in mockery and now waited for her to speak. Standing before a crowd, I found my voice. The town hall glowed with amber light, its tall windows catching the final sweep of dusk like stained glass. Evelyn stood behind the curtain, a slim note card trembling between her fingers. The auditorium wasn't packed, but every seat felt occupied by more than just a body. It was history, memory, watchfulness. "Breathe," Lily whispered beside her, adjusting the collar of Evelyn's coat. "They're not waiting to judge you. They're waiting to follow you." Evelyn nodded, though her hands were slick with nerves. The podium felt a mile away. From behind the curtain, she could hear the rustle of programs, the occasional cough, the low hum of community. The same people who once looked past her now waited to look at her. And among them, Daniel sat in the fourth row, arms crossed but present. She didn't know if he'd come until she saw him enter and not look away. The clerk called her name. She stepped out. The hush fell like snow. As she reached the podium, her heel caught slightly on the edge of the rug, but she righted herself before the stumble became visible. A small gesture, but enough to send a tiny ripple of warmth through her chest. "You still have your footing." She glanced at her card. Blank words stared back at her. So she slipped it into her coat pocket and looked up. "My name is Evelyn Broderick," she began. "Some of you know me, some of you think you do. And for a long time, I thought that was enough to be seen, just enough not to cause trouble." She let the silence settle. No microphone whine, no interruptions. But invisibility isn't always a tragedy. Sometimes, it's the seed of something better. Her eyes scanned the room. Old classmates, bakery owners, the retired librarian, the young waitress from the cafe who offered her that first cup of solidarity. She nodded toward her gently. "I sat at a table across the street while people laughed about me like I couldn't hear. I didn't speak then, not because I couldn't, but because I thought I wasn't supposed to." The room was still. Even Daniel's posture shifted. "I bought that building 12 years ago, and I let it sit quiet, like me, until one day I realized, quiet doesn't heal. It hides." A cough near the back. A shuffle of chairs. No exit. Dignity isn't about how loudly you demand respect. It's about claiming your space, whether it's in a courtroom, a cafe, or a cracked seat in a public meeting. A murmur rippled, faint but full. "I didn't start this fight for fame. I didn't want a story. I wanted a seat. For myself. For others. For those who feel passed over. Left out. Too late." She paused. Her throat tightened. Not from fear, but from the overwhelming truth that she was no longer speaking only for herself. Lily stood at the side of the stage, her hands clasped at her heart. And Daniel's arms were no longer crossed. His eyes held hers, soft, unsure, but open. A single tear fell down a woman's cheek near the front row. Evelyn didn't know her, but she'd remember that face forever. "I am not the past," Evelyn said gently. "I am the builder of what comes next." Applause didn't erupt. It grew like dawn seeping into a room. Slow, deep, earned. Evelyn stepped back. Lily met her near the curtain, pulled her close. "You lit something," she whispered. "They're going to follow it." Backstage, Evelyn sipped water slowly. Her pulse finally slowed. Her phone buzzed. An email. Subject: "Let's bring your cafe model to our town." The sender? A mayor's office 3 counties away. Evelyn stared at the message, the applause still echoing in the chamber behind her. She didn't smile yet, but her hand drifted toward the reply button, because for the first time, her voice wasn't just being heard. It was being called, and she was ready to answer. A corporate chain wanted in. No strings attached. The cafe's new windows hadn't yet been installed, and the interior still smelled of varnish and pine. Evelyn stood by the folding table they'd temporarily claimed as their project hub, poring over a packet thick with glossy renderings and bullet-pointed dreams. Across the top of the proposal, in clean corporate font, steep in sage, Strategic Community Partnerships Proposal, Broderick Site Model. She flipped through it again, slower this time. Section headings read like promises. Locally inspired branding, workforce upskilling initiatives, low-impact franchise framework. Lily peered over her shoulder. They want to turn this place into a case study. I know, Evelyn said. Her tone was flat, unreadable. And they'll fund full expansion, hire local and pay your staff above minimum wage. I know. Mark arrived late, still buttoning his coat. He picked up the proposal, skimmed the first few lines, and whistled. This is gold, he said. They're giving you everything. Control, name rights, the works. You'd be the face of it, Evelyn. She said nothing. They've got lawyers smarter than anyone in this zip code, he continued, and real estate reach in 20 states. You sign this, they'll name a building after you. Lily cleared her throat. It's not about a building. Mark snorted. It's always about the building. Evelyn sat down, the proposal resting on her lap like a sleeping animal. Too still, too easy. She looked up at Lily, voice quiet. If we let them in, we lose something, or we gain a way to give more. Lily countered gently. Jobs, healthcare, tuition support for workers, all the things we dreamed but couldn't afford. Evelyn stared at the packet's centerfold, a rendering of the cafe redone in Steepen Sage's muted green and beige, soft lights hanging above uniformed baristas. It was sleek, efficient, polished, too polished. That night she sat alone in the front room with a mug of tea gone cold. She hadn't touched the contract. The house creaked softly around her, familiar in its silence. A soft knock startled her. She opened the door to find Daniel, hands tucked into his jacket. Saw the news, he said. That chain's offer. It's a big deal. She nodded. Big deal doesn't always mean best deal. They sat on the porch. He didn't lecture. He just asked to see the proposal. After 10 minutes he closed it and said, what you built here, the story of it doesn't fit inside this template. You'd make it shinier maybe, but not deep. Evelyn felt a lump rise in her throat. I don't want it to be about me, she said. Then don't sell it, he replied. Grow it like you have. Slow. Honest. Community first. Let people copy you. Don't let them own you. She exhaled deeply and went inside. The next morning, with hands steadied by resolve and not caffeine, she typed a brief direct email to the Steepen Sage development team. Thank you for your generous proposal and your interest in what we've built here, but I believe true community cannot be licensed. We'll be growing this our own way. Roots down, voice up, warmly. Evelyn Broderick. She pressed send. She didn't regret it. Not even when, 10 minutes later, her phone rang. Unknown number. Manhattan area code. She picked up. Miss Broderick, came a voice smooth as Riverstone. This is Courtney Ellman, VP of Public Strategy at Steepen Sage. Before we move on, are you sure you want to walk away from this? Evelyn glanced across her cafe, the mismatched chairs, Lily's garden blooming defiantly in the corner, and the clipboard of local job applicants resting on the counter. She didn't answer. Not yet, because what mattered most couldn't be franchised, and that made it worth fighting for. Dusk fell. I stood at a crossroads. The sun dipped low, casting honeyed light across the cafe patio. The mismatched chairs, once rescued from second-hand shops and driveways, glowed like relics arranged for a ritual. Evelyn stood just outside the doorframe, arms folded lightly, her scarf trailing in the evening breeze. It had been a quiet day. No news vans, no meeting, just volunteers finishing paint touch-ups, Lily pruning the belonging garden, and Evelyn herself watching it all unfold like a woman witnessing her life from the outside. A hand-painted sign leaned against the front stoop, opening soon, a place to be seen. She hadn't written it. Someone else had. But it felt like a name. From the corner of her eye, she saw the two elders from the community center approaching. Mrs. Pratt and Mr. Ortiz, both wrapped in coats far too heavy for late spring. They each carried something. Miss Pratt handed over a framed photo of the original tailor shop, faded and sepia-toned. Mr. Ortiz passed her a glass jar full of loose bills and wrinkled envelopes. "Donation jar," he said. "Collected at church library and a few Tuesday lunches." His voice lowered. "No string." Evelyn took it without speaking. Overwhelmed, she didn't cry. She just bowed her head. A gesture older than gratitude. Inside, Lily had spread documents across the bar counter, local vendor contracts, opening day permits, and one page Evelyn hadn't yet seen, titled simply, "Why We Exist." "I thought you might want something official," Lily said. "A mission, something people can hold on to when they walk through the door." Evelyn read it slowly. "We are here to serve dignity over drinks, belonging over branding. We are not perfect, but we are present, and we will remain because we know what it's like to be erased." She didn't ask who wrote it. She simply nodded. "Add it to the wall," she said. "Right by the front door." Later she stepped onto the sidewalk just as Daniel crossed the street, carrying a crate of mason jar. His steps slowed when he saw her. "I'm not staying long," he said. "Just dropping these off." But he didn't leave right away. Instead he stood beside Lily, who was organizing chalkboard menus with an ease that masked her exhaustion. "Nice touch," he murmured. "Evelyn's idea," Lily said. "She wanted handwritten everything." Daniel gave a small nod, then looked at Evelyn. "I still don't agree with everything," he said. "I wouldn't expect you to," she replied. "But you're here." That, it seemed, was enough. The breeze picked up just as Mark appeared. Papers in hand, expression unreadable. "I had the lease adjusted," he said, stopping at the edge of the patio. 20-year term. Renewal optional by your team only. I'll keep my stake, but I'll never step back in unless invited. He extended the folder like an olive branch made of law. Evelyn opened it and read the summary clause. Her name alone was listed under authority. "Why?" she asked. Mark looked past her toward the garden, the chairs, the glow in the windows. "Because this isn't mine." It never was. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she pulled out her pen. The scratch of her signature echoed louder in her chest than any applause she'd ever received. Lily smiled, quiet and proud. Daniel didn't smile, but he didn't look away either. And as Mark stepped back, folding the lease into his coat, something passed between them. Acknowledgement. If not peace. Night fell fully then, wrapping the town in blue velvet. From around the corner the first string of paper lanterns blinked to life, volunteers threading them along the fence line. Music tested through outdoor speakers. A child's laughter pierced the quiet. Evelyn stepped inside. Tomorrow the doors would open. But tonight, they prepared. She lit a candle by the register, its flame small but sure. Then she looked up at the space, bare, blooming, holy with possibility. And behind her someone whispered, "They're coming. They said I didn't belong. I made this belong to everyone." The morning air shimmered with anticipation. Streamers looped from light poles. The scent of fresh pastries and brewed coffee mingled with garden earth. A narrow blue ribbon stretched across the entry to the cafe, fluttering like breath held too long. Evelyn stood beside it, silver scissors in hand. The crowd was small town, wide-hearted. Elders in their Sunday coats, teenagers with chalk-stained hands, toddlers fidgeting in wagons. Every face, it seemed, had once looked past her. Now they looked to her. Lily stood at her right, a clipboard tucked under one arm, her curls wild from the morning rush. Daniel hovered to the left, not front and center but close enough to feel like foundation. He offered Evelyn a small, silent nod. She returned it. That was all they needed. Julian, her lawyer, was in the back smiling, arms crossed, his tie slightly askew. The reporter from the Gazette raised her camera. A red light blinked. "Ready?" Lily whispered. Evelyn glanced at the scissors, then the door behind the ribbon. "Yes," she said. "Let's begin." The blades clicked softly. The ribbon parted like dawn breaking. Cheers rose, sincere and bright. Inside, the cafe came alive instantly. Baristas moved with gentle confidence, handing over first cups like sacred offering. Music trickled from the old record player Evelyn insisted on keeping. A pair of little girls danced barefoot, near the front window, spinning in dresses with sticky fingers. Lily stepped up to the makeshift podium, cleared her throat, and There was a time when this corner of Main Street held silence, a building forgotten, a woman too, but someone dared to believe that quiet wasn't the end of the story. As Lily spoke, Evelyn moved through the crowd. She shook hands, exchanged hugs, faces blurred, but voices didn't. You inspired my daughter. We started reading again because of you. I haven't felt proud of this town in years. And then, just as Lily finished her speech, and led a gentle applause, Evelyn felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned. Daniel. He didn't say anything. He just pulled her into a brief, wordless hug. It was tight, earnest, and when he stepped back, his eyes were glassy. I get it now, he said, just loud enough for her. All of it. And then he was gone, slipping back into the crowd. But Evelyn didn't need him to stay. He'd said what mattered. Near the edge of the garden, Mark's wife stood quietly. When their eyes met, she clapped slowly, genuinely. No more chill in her expression, just recognition. A line for coffee began to curve out the front door. Local reporters passed microphones to teenagers and grandmothers alike. One woman told the story of her first paycheck going into Evelyn's donation jar. Another described watching her mother smile for the first time in years at the Tuesday lunch preview. And then, once the stream of interviews and tours and cake slices began to ebb, Evelyn walked outside and took her place. Her table, the old one, still set just off the corner beneath a shade of leaves and afternoon sun. But now, she wasn't alone. One by one, chairs filled beside her. The teenage girl who brought her the town hall letter. The cafe waitress who first handed her coffee in quiet solidarity. Lily, hands smudged with soil and ink. Daniel, returning with a tray of lemon tarts and extra forks. Mark, standing off to the side, not sitting but present. The air buzzed with stories. No more mocking. No more invisibility, just presence. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, hands wrapped around her mug, and watched her cafe stretch open like a living thing. Music drifted. Laughter overlapped. The town for once felt whole. And as the sun dipped behind the buildings, casting long gold over the table where she once sat alone, Evelyn raised her cup. The toast wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be. It was in every glance, every plate passed, every chair pulled close. Her story, once erased, was now the foundation for others to gather. She smiled. She was